Edgar Allan Poe. On the 3rd of October 1849, Edgar Allan Poe was found in Baltimore outside a tavern called Gunner's Hall. He was delirious, disoriented, and wearing clothes that were not his own. Witnesses described him as barely coherent, repeatedly calling out the name Reynolds, a person who has never been conclusively identified. He was taken to Washington College Hospital, where he drifted in and out of consciousness for 4 days before dying on October 7. What happened during the days before he was found remains unknown. Poe had been traveling from Richmond to Philadelphia but never arrived. No reliable record exists of where he went in between. The clothing he wore was cheap and ill-fitting, very different from the careful appearance Poe normally maintained. Doctors at the time recorded almost nothing about his symptoms beyond agitation and confusion. Medical records from the hospital have since disappeared. The official cause of death was listed vaguely as congestion of the brain, a 19th century term that could mean almost anything. Several theories emerged afterward. One of the most persistent involves cooping, a form of election fraud common in 19th century cities. Victims were kidnapped, beaten, forced to drink alcohol, and made to vote repeatedly under different disguises. Gunner's Hall was being used as a polling station on election day. If Poe had been forced through that system, it might explain the strange clothing and severe disorientation. But no proof survived. The witnesses died, the records vanished, and one of the most famous writers in American history left the world in exactly the kind of unresolved darkness he spent his career describing. The Somerton Man. On the 1st of December 1948, a well-dressed man was found dead on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He appeared to be resting against a seawall with a cigarette in his hand. There were no signs of violence, no obvious injuries, and no identification. An autopsy found that his organs were severely congested in a way doctors believed suggested poisoning, yet no known poison was detected in his body. The investigation quickly became stranger. All labels had been carefully removed from his clothing. His pockets contained a bus ticket, a train ticket, a comb, and a pack of chewing gum. Nothing revealed his identity. Several months later, police discovered a hidden pocket sewn into his trousers. Inside it was a small rolled piece of paper printed with the words "Tamam shud," a Persian phrase meaning ended or finished. The paper had been torn from a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Eventually, investigators located the exact book it came from, abandoned in a car. Inside the back cover was a strange code written in pencil lines of letters that have never been deciphered. Also written in the book was a phone number that led police to a woman living nearby. She denied knowing the man, though witnesses later said she appeared visibly shaken when shown his death mask. Despite years of investigation, no one identified him. His fingerprints matched no records. His face matched no missing persons. He was buried as a complete stranger. Dag Hammarskjöld. Dag Hammarskjöld was the second Secretary General of the United Nations and one of the most influential diplomats of the Cold War. In September 1961, he was traveling to negotiate a ceasefire during the Congo crisis, a violent conflict fueled by colonial collapse, mining interests, and international power struggles. Late at night on September 17, his aircraft approached Ndola Airport in what was then northern Rhodesia, now Zambia. It never landed. The plane crashed in a forest less than 15 kilometers from the runway. 15 people died. One bodyguard survived briefly but died days later in the hospital. Initial investigations concluded the crash was likely the result of pilot error, but several details complicated that conclusion. Witnesses in nearby villages reported seeing another aircraft following Hammarskjöld's plane shortly before the crash. Some described flashes in the sky. Others reported hearing explosions before the aircraft descended. Photos taken at the crash site revealed that Hammarskjöld's body was lying outside the wreckage. A playing card, the Ace of Spades, was found tucked into his collar, though investigators never confirmed how it got there. Decades later, newly released documents suggested that intelligence agencies from multiple countries had been monitoring the flight. Some evidence hinted that mercenaries operating in the region may have targeted the plane. No final explanation has ever been confirmed. The United Nations has reopened investigations multiple times over the years. Each time, the conclusion remains incomplete. A peace mission ended in silence before reaching the negotiating table. Gareth Williams. Gareth Williams was a mathematician and cryptography expert working for Britain's intelligence agency GCHQ. In August 2010, colleagues reported him missing after he failed to appear at work for several days. Police entered his London apartment and found almost nothing disturbed. Then they noticed a red North Face sports bag placed inside the bathtub. The bag had been padlocked from the outside. Inside it was Williams' body. He had been dead for at least a week. There were no clear signs of struggle in the apartment. No fingerprints other than Williams were found on the lock or the bag. The bathroom door had been closed. Investigators initially suggested the possibility that Williams had accidentally locked himself inside the bag as part of a private fetish experiment. To test this, forensic experts attempted to recreate the scenario. They used identical bags and locks under controlled conditions. None of them were able to place themselves inside and lock the bag from the outside. Further complications emerged during the investigation. Williams had been temporarily assigned to work with the British Foreign Intelligence Service MI6 shortly before his death. Some of his work involved analyzing financial networks linked to Russian organized crime. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar individuals near the building around the time of his disappearance. In 2012, a British coroner formally ruled the death likely unlawful killing. No suspect was ever charged. The apartment where it happened remained almost perfectly orderly. The only disturbance in the entire room was the locked bag in the bathtub. Alexander Litvinenko. Alexander Litvinenko was once an officer in Russia's Federal Security Service, the organization that succeeded the Soviet KGB. In the late 1990s, he publicly accused his superiors of corruption and illegal operations. Soon afterward, he fled Russia and received political asylum in the United Kingdom. From London, he continued criticizing the Russian government. On the 1st of November 2006, Litvinenko met two former Russian security officers at a hotel in central London. They drank tea together in the hotel bar. Within hours, Litvinenko became violently ill. At first, doctors suspected food poisoning, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. His hair began falling out, his organs started shutting down. Specialists eventually discovered the cause: polonium-210, a rare radioactive isotope almost never encountered outside nuclear facilities. Over the next 3 weeks, Litvinenko's body slowly collapsed under radiation poisoning. Before his death, he released a statement accusing the Russian government of ordering the attack. British investigators later traced a trail of radioactive contamination across London, inside airplanes, restaurants, taxis, and hotel rooms visited by the two men who had met him that day. A public inquiry in the United Kingdom concluded in 2016 that the poisoning was probably approved by senior Russian leadership. The suspects returned to Russia shortly after the meeting. Russia refused extradition. No trial has ever taken place. Litvinenko's death demonstrated something unusual even by Cold War standards: a weapon that left evidence everywhere except in a courtroom. Roberto Calvi. Roberto Calvi was the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, once one of Italy's largest private banks. During the early 1980s, the bank became entangled in a massive financial scandal involving secret accounts, offshore shell companies, and suspected connections to organized crime and Vatican banking institutions. In June 1982, the financial system around Calvi collapsed. Banco Ambrosiano lost more than $1 billion. Calvi fled Italy using false documents. Days later, his body was found hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London. At first, police ruled the death a suicide, but investigators soon noticed details that complicated that conclusion. Calvi had bricks and heavy stones stuffed into the pockets of his clothing. Cash from several currencies was found on his body. The rope and scaffold used to suspend him required movement along narrow construction beams beneath the bridge, something difficult for a lone person to arrange. His nickname in Italian financial circles had been God's Banker because of the bank's relationship with Vatican finances. The bridge where he was found carried the name Blackfriars, historically associated with a religious order. Some investigators suspected symbolic staging. Years later, forensic experts concluded that Calvi likely did not hang himself. Trials were held in Italy against alleged mafia figures suspected of involvement in the killing. All were eventually acquitted due to insufficient evidence. The collapse of Banco Ambrosiano remains one of the largest financial scandals in European history. The man who ran it died alone beneath a bridge that may or may not have been chosen deliberately. No one was ever convicted of his murder. Jill Dando. On the morning of the 26th of April, 1999, Jill Dando returned to her house in Fulham, London. She had just come back from buying groceries and placing letters in the mail. As she approached her front door, someone standing close behind her fired a single shot into the back of her head. The weapon appeared to be a handgun fitted with a suppressor. The attack took seconds. There were no reports of a struggle. Dando was one of the most recognizable faces on British television at the time. She hosted the BBC program Crime Watch, which reconstructed unsolved crimes and asked viewers for information. Because of her public profile, the murder quickly became one of the most heavily investigated cases in modern British policing. Detectives initially considered several possibilities: retaliation from criminals featured on Crime Watch, a targeted professional hit, or an obsessed individual acting alone. 3 years later, a man named Barry George was arrested and convicted, largely based on a single microscopic particle of firearm residue found in his coat. The evidence was controversial from the beginning. In 2008, the conviction was overturned after forensic reviews questioned the reliability of that evidence. George was acquitted at retrial and released. Despite thousands of witness interviews and years of investigation, no one has been convicted of the murder. The killing remains one of Britain's most perplexing unsolved crimes. A single gunshot on a quiet London street ended the life of a national television figure. The person who pulled the trigger has never been identified. The Isdal Woman. On the 29th of November 1970, a father and his 2 daughters hiking near Bergen, Norway, entered a remote area known as Isdalen. The valley had a local reputation for suicides and strange accidents. Among the rocks, they discovered the partially burned body of a woman. The scene immediately raised questions. The woman's body showed signs of fire damage, yet investigators also found empty sleeping pill bottles, melted plastic containers, and scattered personal items nearby. Her posture suggested she had collapsed where she lay rather than being placed there afterward. When police began examining her belongings, the mystery deepened. Her clothing had every identifying label carefully removed. Even the tags on her suitcase had been cut away. 2 suitcases connected to her were later found at a Bergen railway station locker. Inside were wigs, multiple currencies, sunglasses, and coded notes. Investigators discovered that the woman had been traveling across Europe under several different identities, checking into hotels using false names. Witnesses described seeing her with different hairstyles and sometimes speaking different languages. Some hotel staff recalled that she often requested rooms facing the back of buildings, avoiding street views. The autopsy revealed large amounts of sleeping pills in her stomach, along with carbon monoxide inhalation from the fire. Authorities eventually ruled the death a probable suicide, though many investigators privately doubted the conclusion. The careful removal of labels, the false identities, and the coded writing suggested a life designed to remain untraceable. More than 50 years later, the woman's identity is still unknown. Her grave in Norway carries no real name,